I remember an article, and it was talking about the digital transformation space, and it was listed probably 20 different industries of who's really leveraging digital transformation the most. Man, oil and gas was third to last, which is crazy.
It's surprising.
It's surprising when you think about how innovative we are in putting holes in the ground and looking at how much more efficient in a 5-year period up there, we were like 25% more efficient. That was mind blowing.
Significant.
Right? It's very significant. Everybody has to understand that generative AI right now isn't going out and solving problems that we couldn't solve. It's just reducing that time to value gap, right?
Everybody's like, oh God, it's going to eliminate landman. It's not.
Everybody's on a different part of their journey in this movement. And that is completely okay. I think everybody needs to realize and not panic if they feel like they're behind, because we are at the very beginning of this thing.
If you want to stay relevant, involved, and active, you're going to have to embrace it. If you're going to be in this business, you better be a survivor and you better adapt.
Yeah.
That's the story of landmen.
Land insights, market trends, industry experts. Welcome to the Land Department Podcast, the state of land and energy as we see it.
It's weird to feel like I'm starting to get old.
Yeah, like they have the Bridge in the Gap, like landman social here in Houston. And
Yeah.
I pretty much feel like I'm on the other side of the gap now.
I know, man. I walked into we had our sales kickoff in Houston up in Conroe, Margaritaville last month. And we had like 250 people there. At one point I looked around the room and I'm like, God, I think I'm the old guy in the room now. I was like, this is...
But you look young, man. You're still holding on to it. Like I've already transitioned. I've got this creepy mustache. I've bald.
Yeah. Well, it's not creepy. It's a new style. You're a hipster now.
Yeah, I'm bringing it back. I'm calling up my inner dad. Brent, Broussard, here we are.
I love it.
That's great.
Well, let's just jump into it, guys. So, man, why don't we just even start how you guys even connected first, and then we'll jump into the Enverus story.
Yeah. So Colin's, it's kind of cool, to kind of keep with the theme of, now that we're the old guys, it feels like, it's cool at this point in my career, at least, and Colin's as well. I'm sure you can say this also is, we're starting to kind of come full circle with people that we met and knew 20 years ago in the business, and seeing people grow and the businesses they work and help create and grow and expand, seeing their success, and being able to keep in touch. And so now, we do this podcast, and I was able to reach out to Colin and ask if he would join us. We're old Louisiana buddies, got some mutual friends. We've been customers of Drilling Info and Enverus at Dudley Land for 20 plus years. We're involved early on with a lot of the things that they were doing when they first got started. So yeah, that's kind of how we knew each other. And Colin was nice enough to be willing to jump on and talk about Enverus and land and just catch up and have a good visit, man. I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks for joining us, Colin.
Absolutely. And hey, look, I'm honored to be on there. You got a big hotshot podcast now. This is awesome, man. No, I would echo that. It is funny going to play, when you go to NAPE now and other, big conferences and shows, and you run into these guys that are CEOs, and you're like, man, I remember when you were like a landman at Swift back in the day. Like, this is
no offense. Would have never thought you'd have made it this far.
Hey, it's wild though, man. But that's who's shaping our industry now, and it's pretty cool to see it.
It is. We all have our paths, and one thing, if you're going to be in this business, you better be a survivor and you better adapt.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the story of landmen, especially. And God, with you being in a technology space, my goodness. Your ride's probably been a wild one, but you've done a lot to shape the business and keep Enverus obviously very relevant and growing and expanding. And I'm just excited to visit with you and kind of rehash the story and really learn and talk more about, how you guys have evolved and where you're headed and where the data and land space and technology space is going to be and what it's going to look like in the future. So, I love it. Fun conversation. So I guess it all started back. When did Drilling Info, which is kind of a precursor to Enverus, when did that first start?
Yeah, so it's been nearly 25 years. It's crazy to say that it's been that long. And I started, I guess it's almost my 23rd year of being there. And when I started, Alan Gilmer is really like every good idea. It started in a bar on a bar napkin, right? And there were core guys that kind of started it all with different backgrounds in the industry. And Alan Gilmer was really the visionary behind it. I don't know if you ever knew Alan, but still was a visionary. And he was somebody that was not only that had a really awesome vision, but was also somebody that was willing to take risks and give people opportunities. And I was one of those people that he gave an opportunity right out of school and started working for those guys. And at that point in time, I think we just had permits on a map. And I think we had 4 or 5 core states that we had permits on. We were just starting to dabble in getting production data, mapped out. But at that time, that was a big deal, right? That was right after they kind of made it through that bubble, that .com bubble, and had ultimately found me in the market. And something I think that still holds true today and our core values is really democratizing data. And really, Alan had worked for some large players, but he was in it for the small guys as well, the small independents that maybe couldn't get their hands on some of that information. And so that's how it started. And then obviously very quickly evolved from there.
Yeah, it did. I remember when I first started with Dudley, in the early 2000s, we were working for Drilling Info. We were helping you guys gather lease data from a bunch of different counties, and that's kind of that was the next step, I guess. It started with permits and production data, and then we started grabbing leases at the county level out the day books. And
I think and in the spirit of this podcast, land certainly, we talked about Alan being a visionary. We had other visionaries at the company too. Lynn Tesoro comes to mind, who really led our land charge. But Alan had this vision of getting in front, stop being reactive and start being, predictive and proactive about things. And certainly land was kind of the tip of the spear on that. And so Alan had the idea of going and getting leasing information, and it was like, all right, well, how are we going to do that? And certainly folks like you helped, but man, we were pretty creative in our approach. We had college students, we had retirees, we had our own employees sleeping in cars and, counties that were active because there was just, there weren't any hotel rooms and going and pulling these leases. And I think that was a big inflection point. Certainly. I think we could say we wouldn't be where we are at Enverus without going and get that land data right at the beginning, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to your core value, democratizing data, we've used it in our company, God, as long as I can remember, when it was Drilling Info, and you could parse data by the abstract or by the section, and it made us more efficient. It made our clients more efficient. And then, God, as the product evolved, it's really central to everything that we do in land. And I think I got it literally last week. I was talking to our business coach and some of our leadership development things that we do about, hey, I need to have a session with our Enverus representative just to bring us up to speed on, okay, this is how the products evolve. These are the new tools. You've got Prism out. And we talked last time, I think in our pre-call, about you get comfortable with using a product in a way that you've always used the product, but you guys have done a great job of evolving that. And so we're having to do yearly trainings, with our people and make sure that we're getting the most out of it. And I think, over the years, as we've worked with, M&A projects, big, acquisition jobs, obviously with our energy clients, due diligence, planning, drilling wells, drilling programs, and all that. Those of our clients who really understand how to use your product and use that data and access all that data, man, they're just so much more efficient. They're so much more proactive, to your point about decision making, that the more that they have in front of them, the more and better decisions they can make. When did that, I mean, obviously it's kind of in your core to advance and grow, but when did you guys really see, at what point in time, obviously as technology evolved, but when did you guys really feel like, man, we've got something here? How do we start expanding? When do we change? Where did it change?
It's a really good question, with the caveat of having been here for the better part of 22 years. it changes. It continues to evolve. So it's every few years something's changing. So you have to, since we started, our concept would be we have to continue to innovate. We build things, we sell things, but we have to identify and make sure we're looking at what the problems are going to be tomorrow, and are we solving for those problems tomorrow? And we don't come up with those problems. We're talking to people like you and our clients to figure out, hey, what are the challenges you're facing, right? And then how do we come up with an innovative approach to go solve that problem? That's product management 101. That's where we start. We start with the clients and we start with the problem. So I think to your point, when it changed, certainly going and pulling leasing information and pulling basic filing information and digitizing those things, that was an inflection point. I would say the second piece is, though, this is a microcosm of what we're talking about here. We had the leasing information. We said, okay, great. Kind of Shell 1.0 hit, the Barnett went crazy. And we said, there's another level of detail when people are running due diligence and going out there and figuring out what's held by production, what's not held by production, what's some of the open acreage out there we could go pull together. There's more diligence that needs to take place. Can we help with that? So Lynn Tesoro led a big charge. We spun up a digitization team, pretty big GIS team. We said, let's go spatially represent these on a map. So let's pull, whether it's section, township, ranges, let's pull the abstract. Let's figure out actually how to get even the complicated ones down in South Texas, all these portions that we can go figure out. Let's go put it on a map. And we started small. We started in the Barnett. I think we went down and then down to South Texas. And then once we had pretty significant coverage in Texas, West Texas was a lot easier than South Texas, as you can imagine. But but then we happened to expand into North Louisiana. We acquired a company, Brad Broussard's company, called Section Check, and they really made their business on selling maps at that point. But we were interested in not the map sales. We were actually interested in the digitized files, and they had everything for the most part north of Alexandria. And we added that on, right before the Haynesville popped. And so you start to talk about these inflection points and how the industry changes. And it's if you don't evolve and you don't get in front, you won't scale. It's one of those things where you'll have this initial pop and then you'll flatten out a little bit, because innovation, constraints breed innovation. So there has to be something in the market that's constrained and that's hard to get to. And that's we started doing that 20 plus years ago. And I think that core idea and value is still embedded. We still think of ourselves. It's kind of like a startup.
Well, you have to. If you're going to scale a company, you have to. You have to be thinking about where, what's coming in, next week, next month, next year, 10 years from now, and be thinking proactive about that. The funny connection we have, Glue, you asked earlier, how do we know each other? Well, I got my start in the business with Brad Broussard. And, before I even knew what a land was and landman was, I was just a person coloring maps. And the maps I was coloring was the work that they were doing for Section Check. And so Brad was an innovator in that sense as well. He had a vision for that. And I think we all at that time were seeing and realizing the need to, congregate data and represent it in a digestible way. Right about that time, early in the 2000s as well, Dudley was developing a GIS platform that was tied to our database, right? Kind of before Esri and Arc Online and those products really evolved to where you could build that off the shelf. We were trying to do the same thing with our clients' data, that proprietary, confidential data that they hired us to gather and do and lease and everything. But when we coupled that with the work that y'all were doing on the mapping side, the innovation of that for us, that's when data management really changed. We could take our data and our shapefiles and our mapping product, couple it with the public data that you guys were consolidating, and it really opened things up. It eliminated waste and, us doing lease checks. We used to do gobs of lease checks. You ding our business every time y'all would come out with some new thing. But the fact is, you can't hold on to yesterday. You got to, embrace what's in front of you and what's happening today. And I think that's what the industry did. And we certainly experienced and felt a big improvement, as you guys rolled that out.
I would say, kind of just piggyback on that. First of all, throw you a bone, Brent. Y'all have always been innovative and on the tech side, forward thinking, and candidly have pushed us pretty hard on some of our product development and things that we need to be better at. And, we don't get better without folks like yourself. Telling us we're not good enough.
Yeah.
Got to be better.
Yeah. The cool thing kind of is, the cool thing to see you guys evolve, and obviously you are a massive and very well-run company, but we share a lot of the same clients, and we hear and experience the same kind of feedback that obviously you guys are hearing. So as you guys evolve, it's always been good to see. It's been a reinforcement for a lot of things that we're experiencing and witnessing and observing as well. So you just got a lot bigger programming team than we have.
Yeah, it's been a riot. The last thing I would say on that, as we were looking at land, and as I was just getting educated in business 2 decades ago, it was very clear that just the land data isn't enough. And so you had landmen that wanted to get in front of the trends, and they're the tip of the spear. And what are the permitting trends? Who's the main questions of not only where the open acreage is, of what's most likely to drill, and all the variables that are associated with getting an answer to that. And I think that's where the value comes in, and that level of data aggregation is what's important. And we had to learn that early on and build our database in a way that you could normalize it so that these things could talk to each other, because without that, you're kind of doing things in a silo. And that's 20 years ago. I think the industry's gotten much better at this, but 20 years ago, certainly, I feel like many companies were working in silos that weren't talking to each other, and the way that data was being used, you kind of saw that. So breaking down those silos, and again, democratizing that data across business units was, and something we're still working. By the way, that's still something that's prevalent in our industry. But we're working to fix that.
Yeah, I think I want to talk about kind of the current state of things, the things that you are still working on, but kind of to wrap up the journey you've been on with Enverus, I'd love to hear you're obviously a leader in the space, and that wasn't how it started. What was it like in competition? How did you differentiate yourself? What set Enverus apart, not only in the fact that you were constantly evolving, but what are some of the things you can look back on, like, wow, that really set us apart from this competitor. This allowed us to become a top market leading company.
Yeah, good question. And it's a good question, because I think any startup is going to need to focus on differentiation, especially when there's a crowded market. I think when Alan and team decided to first be cloud-based, they were the first ones. That was a clear differentiation, right? Anybody could pay $99 a month and just go online and see where people were filing permits. That was part one. I think part two, if you look, as we started to scale, I mean, we were under $1 million in revenue when I started, but as we started to scale up and we started to add employees and became a real company and had to focus on and started running into, because look, every startup, there's a little bit of a honeymoon period where you're not running into any of the larger competitors, because you find a niche use case and you go after that niche use case, and there's generally people, it's normally low cost and people will pay for it. The challenge is continuing to scale that so that you can reinvest back into the business to build better and new things, and stay profitable and all of those good things. But I'd say for us, differentiation that really allowed us to scale is staying very close with our clients. So, Brent, if you think back in the day, we were a customer-centric organization. All of our customer-facing reps were spending a ton of time. And that's the product development. Those are the product development ideas that came back. That was a clear differentiation. But again, in the spirit of this podcast, land for us, if you want to get tactical as far as the data sets, was a very clear differentiator. If you look at the competitors, the data competitors back then, almost no one was focusing on land. And then all of a sudden, hard is hard to follow. So aggregating all of those, I think we got upwards of, between 5 and 10 billion leases in our system, going and trying to pull 5 or 10 million leases. And even back then, sending people to the courthouses, which was the only way you could get it. Some of those are digitized today. Yeah. But building a team to digitize, go get them, boots on the ground, and then come back and digitize, like that was hard to do. And so the land clearly differentiated in us. And then as we grew, I think a lot of what differentiated us was having almost soup to nuts. And we talked about that data across the spectrum, having all that data where you could come to one place and get your answers that you needed. clearly that was a differentiator as well. But we've held on to some of those same values. I mean, customer service, customer success, product driven through our customer problems. A lot of those are still differentiators for us. Now we've got a lot more because we're at scale, but I think those are some of the more tactical ones at the beginning anyway.
Yeah. Are there any other tech companies out there that are in different industries that you kind of look up to, or you feel like we love their ethos? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, I can name a bunch. I'm on the product side of the business. So you look at customers with massively high ratings and, like an Apple or, all of, as far as level of innovation. You look at what Salesforce did early on and, Benioff's vision for having a cloud-based vision that was doing something different and wanted to be best in class. There's a lot of them out there. It's wild to say that we are the largest SaaS business in the world focused on energy. So at that point, just saying that now is crazy because there aren't a lot out there that do exactly what we do, which is cool, right? But I think there's a lot of those. I think a lot of the cloud-based innovative companies that focus on aggregating data and then running, building analytics off of it, even whether it was in healthcare or other areas, are things we at least looked at. But we always said we're always going to be in energy, and energy is our focus. We're not going to expand out of energy, and I think that's also somewhat unique to what we do.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads to the current state of things, right? Obviously, y'all grown to a very impressive company and a big company, and I mean, you're at the center of data in the energy business. And we've talked about how it's kind of started with land, but it's grown so much more beyond that. You've got engineering tools, you have a lot of things there. What's the current state of the Enverus platform? What all have you aggregated into the system? Talking about that data. Where do you stand now? What's the product look like today?
Yeah, well, I'll just say this, Brent. That's a much harder question to answer today than it was, 20 years ago when we were talking through this. Because again, it's so broad. But I think, look, and the fact of the matter is we have to continue to invest to build this stuff out. I think we've invested close to $5 billion over the last 10 years in building out new innovation, and that that includes some acquisitions we made. But the best way I could distill it down quickly is today we have three core areas of the business. The first core area is what most of these listeners listening to this are probably familiar with. That's our energy analytics and commodity business. So that's where we started. 25 years of data that started with land but carries across the life of the well. So everybody's using us, from land professionals, upstream operators, midstream, OFS, financial services. So they're all using us in different ways on the platform to make data-driven decisions for their business. That's like part one of our business. Part two, which another third of our business now, is what we're calling an energy network application. So that's where we got 40,000 suppliers facilitating source to pay for nearly 85% of all digital spend. So we got almost, open invoices, the flagship product there. We've got close to 300 billion a year that flows through that network. So that's kind of the second piece. And then the third aspect now is what's newest to our portfolio. That's power and energy transition. So we've invested heavily over the last, I think we've made close to 7 acquisitions just in the last few years. And essentially thinking about looking to run that playbook back that we were in with oil and gas 20 plus years ago, and almost doing the same thing on the energy transition side. So if you look at those 3 areas of the business, and now granted, what's challenging is that even within our energy networks or energy analytics and commodity business, we talked about a landman using that, or somebody. It could be a reservoir engineer, it could be a geologist, or it could be somebody in the financial service community. Everybody has a different use case. There's literally 1,000 different use cases that you could run. So that sometimes makes it challenging to articulate what we do, depending on who you're talking to. But I think those 3 areas are kind of where we stand today. And we're about a $600 million business, and we've got about 2,000 employees, 30 different offices globally, and so that support all those different aspects.
Yeah. Well, to your point, everybody, that this information is there. How you use it, is really where the value is.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in, what kind of brought y'all to the decision, to get into the open invoice side of things, like what spurred that? Was that something that just an opportunity presented itself, or was it strategic for you guys and then you capitalized on it?
Extremely strategic. I'd say any acquisition, Enverus has made quite a few acquisitions in the last 20 years, but every acquisition for us is going to be strategic, and it's generally either going to be, we're acquiring data, we're acquiring technology, or we're acquiring intellectual capital. And the key is we are an integrator. We don't buy things to bolt on. So we want to figure out how to leverage the value. And I'll say most people, first of all, Oildex was a great business. I mean, it's something like we talked about. I think 400, 500 operators are using that operationally, and suppliers every single day. So that was interesting to us, being on the operational side of the business. But more importantly, think about the data. Think about the data that flows through when you're talking about that, $300 billion in spend that we could help educate people on. And so that was a combination of data versus another side of the business that we felt like we should know more about and be into. And we've clearly added even onto that piece of the business. And we're, the most recent acquisition that we made was Bid Out. And so we wanted to be more comprehensive around sourcing and helping people on the sourcing part of the source to pay journey. So we'll continue to innovate there, but it made sense for us for sure.
Yeah, we're actually participating in that Bid Out platform now.
Oh, great.
And trying to get it going. It's something, to your point, it's kind of, service providers follow the same path, is where's the need, where's the opportunity, what else can I do for my client, and, the renewables business obviously has been a big deal for us in the land community, for landmen, field landmen especially. It's provided more opportunities to work and stay busy. It's expanded our footprint, so landmen across the country can stay active and stay involved in projects and do land work, but it's in the renewable space. And y'all's expansion into the renewables industry was a no-brainer. It's like, let's roll it back, let's get the band back together, because the same information for sourcing is necessary. Right.
Yeah. I think that's right. And the other piece I would say is on that is, here's another example. One of the most fun stints in my career is when I was general manager for our oilfield services division. And that was a division or segment of our industry that we felt like we were underserving, meaning we had focused on upstream operators, and we felt like there was a void for solutions and products for the OFS. And so going out and trying, meeting with 100 different OFS folks and trying to come up with, hey, what are the problems you're trying to solve? You want to grow your business, you want to get paid faster. What are the things that we can actually build to do that? And we did. And that's when we built the first, mobile app and some other applications for OFS. But you could take that concept, right, and apply that to, as you look to the energy transition space, primary renewables. It's all about finding that need and what are they going to need tomorrow, and how do we go and build it? And, clearly, I think what you just noted was in our expansion into renewables is our energy transition was simply, we've got the infrastructure in place. So we've invested billions and being experts in ingesting data, normalizing, curating data, and then leveraging the analytics platforms to make the most of that. So why shouldn't we do this? Like this makes all the sense in the world. And I think now what we see is to get a true answer around things such as demand forecasts and how that's going to be impacted on both sides and what that means for future development on both sides, you kind of have to have all of it in order to make an educated, strategy. And so it was a no-brainer for us. I think you said that well.
Yeah. Brent, you had asked in our pre-call for this about most underutilized features of Enverus. I'm not sure if you were able to gather any information on that, Colin, but do you have anything for us?
Man, it's tough because we have such a powerful platform. Like even talking about Prism, which is our flagship application, I feel like most of the users that I work with are still only using a fraction of what that thing can do. It's almost, I hate to equate it to this, but think about like Excel and what that, if you see somebody that can really fly with an application, it makes you think, man, I'm only using 5% of that. And I think so Prism in itself is underutilized, and we're working on that. We could talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing that's in my division on the Gen AI side, but clearly Prism is, and by the way, I think we have like 100,000 users on Prism. So it's not like it's underutilized in the market. It's there. We still had a cohort of users that don't want to change, and they have one workflow that they do, and they're used to doing back in the old, the old platform that we have, and that's the only thing they want to do. And they can get the answer they need, but at some point you've got to lean forward.
It's like,
a
what are
little
they
bit.
missing, right? What else could they be
Exactly.
getting that they're not aware of? And that was the point. It makes a lot of sense. You have a lot of users that need the same information. They just need it in a different way and for a different purpose. So it's very easy. And I can speak to this within our organization. The things that we need Enverus for, it's repetitive. We need this so we can incorporate it into that so we can tell this story. And it's you can get stuck in that workflow, right? And it's one of the things I mentioned earlier. We're going to constantly having to do trainings with our team so that they know how to keep up with the product. Prism is a prime example. I asked my guys, and we've got 25 project managers in the company. Hey, tell me about Prism. Are you using it? I'm like, no, man, I'm just pulling my production report like I always have. I'm like, oh God.
Well, I don't think it's, in fairness, who likes trainings and who likes to learn how to use new stuff? Like no one likes doing that, right? So it's I don't think that's necessarily unique. But I will say this: I remember a article. I don't know if it was Gartner who came out with it, probably 6 or 7 years ago, and it was talking about the digital transformation space, and it was listed probably 20 different industries of who's really leveraging digital transformation the most. Man, oil and gas was third to last, I think, which is crazy. Now, I think we've made a lot of strides with IoT and other things over the last 5 or 10 years, but it's surprising when you think about how innovative we are in putting holes in the ground and looking at how much more efficient in a 5-year period. I was listening to Toby Rice give a talk the other day. In a 5-year period up there, we were like 25% more efficient. That was mind blowing, and that's all about innovating.
Significant.
Right? It's very significant, and our industry's incredibly innovative. So when you think about something like, why aren't we leveraging stuff like that? Like in some areas and silos of the business, we're still doing things in the exact same way. I look at that as opportunity, right? Like as somebody that's building product, you just got to make it easier to access and easier to use. I think that's if you want to try to promote change.
And from an organization standpoint, you have to, and I guess I have this perspective a little differently now than I did, throughout a lot of my career. You have to establish a culture of learning and growth and innovation, right? If your peers and your counterparts and the people in the office with you all embrace that, it's going to be much easier to push that through the company. But if you're holding on to the old way and you're just status quo, you're not going to grow and advance. We see that a lot with, with just our company, some of the new people that we bring in, these younger men and women, man, they're driving and pushing us. And fortunately, we make it a point to try to be innovative, to try to embrace that and try to embrace some of that growth. And that's the only way you can really leverage what you're spending, your money on, spending money on a software as a service platform. You want to get the most of it, right? And you got to push that and drive that. And if it's in your culture, man, you're all the better for it.
100%. Yeah. Couldn't agree more with that statement.
Yeah.
Colin, you had mentioned generative AI, and probably a good thing to explain what that is, but it's also kind of a good lead into like the future of energy tech and Enverus itself, and actually how people can get the most out of tools like Prism. So can you explain to our listeners what generative AI is and how that's probably consuming a lot of your time and thoughts these days, and where that's going to lead the company?
Yeah, I'm happy to, and we'll keep it relatively high level, but just as a caveat, my position at the company is I'm in the product organization. I have a relatively small team of developers, engineers, data scientists, and we generally focus on net new emerging technologies for product development. So we got to stay in front of the curve to make sure we're getting our clients innovative solutions, right? And so clearly, a little over a year ago, when generative AI popped up into every news article you're reading, we had to lean into it and figure out, what is this thing? Does it have staying power? What does this mean for our industry? What does this mean for our company? All of those things we quickly did. And I think the first thing I would say to remind people is that generative AI is just a subset of artificial intelligence. People have been using artificial intelligence for decades, right? I mean, you all use it every single day, whether you order an Uber or, ask for something on your phone or ask Alexa for something. I mean, like, artificial intelligence has been around forever. We even invested a ton I looked back and we had 35 products that are largely led by machine learning or AI or some form of that. But generative AI, when ChatGPT came out, that was pretty eye-opening, because for the first time, you had this application that you could converse with and it remembered. It had context. You could ask follow-up questions. It was almost like you were talking to a human. And they leveraged some of the models that Google had put out back in 2017, but really innovated around that. And I think the important thing about what ChatGPT or OpenAI did is it was scalable. And what I mean by scalable is that they had, they started out and it took them 5 days to get to, like, 1 million users. And within a couple of months, they had 100 million. And today they've got 5 billion visits a month. So you think about that scalability, right? No one has to be experts. And for people on this call, I would say the reason that's important isn't because people are using ChatGPT all the time, but you got 5 billion hits just on ChatGPT. That's not even counting, like, Gemini or Perplexity or some of these other models that are coming out. What's important is that you got 5 billion people whose expectations are changing on how they're solving problems. So how they go get an answer to something, how they mine data, what their expectations are and the speed at which they're getting answers, this is changing. Like, I mean, it's changing every single day. So, and it's just, DeepSeek had even more users than that, by the way, like when that thing came out.
Oh, that was crazy.
We have to get on board and try to understand. And then what you have to do is start distilling down. And what we did, we started small and we said, first of all, let's focus on security. Let's figure out, like, how, let's make sure this thing's secure, as we always do. But second is, like, what are some of the problems that we feel like this could solve for our client that's low-hanging fruit? And let's start piloting these things. And to your point, Brent, on driving a culture of innovation, let's come up with a lot of ideas at the top of the funnel. Let's go all the way down and let's figure out what we can do now. So we started small, introduced our first product in a matter of about 6 months, called the Instant Analyst. And, we can happy to talk about that a little more because it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But I think without generative AI, the things that we can do today, I mean, they weren't even possible 18 months ago. Like, and if you think about that, it's wild. The world is changing. Literally, it's almost exhausting trying to stay in front of this stuff.
Yeah. Can you give that example?
Yeah. What we started on quickly is because what these large language models are really good at, and that's the driver behind a lot of these early releases. What they're really good at is aggregating a massive amount of text, right? So think about any area in your business, and let's talk about land, right? Like Silas says, Silas is our head of land. He's like, it's a pigment to paper business. Think of how much data is caught up in PDF documents or just documents in themselves that's some relatively trapped, right? And, we made a business out of pulling out some of that filing information, but there's still a lot of valuable data in there. What we also had 60,000 research documents that, imagine we got team of 200 folks that are using our data to provide insights to the energy space. What we're hearing from clients, though, is that sometimes challenging. We put out 15 a day. That's a lot, right? Like, how do you get what's important? I mean, how do I get an answer for something if I've got to go mine 60,000 research documents? Like, that's really challenging. Yeah. And within those research documents, there's charts and there's graphs that you have to go and find. So we said, hey, let's start there first. Let's build something where you can just ask a question. It mines 20 years of research and it comes back and it gives you Enverus's perspective on demand or emerging regions or frac trends or any of those things that you're generally asking and you have to go pull a lot of data for. Now it just answers it for you. So we put that in there, built a mobile app around it that people are really adopting, and that was version 1. And then we took what we learned from there and we're applying it to a number of aspects in the business, which we can talk about, leasing being one of them. But Khalil, that was kind of the story or how we started with leveraging Gen AI for some product development.
Yeah. So, how about land? So, you mentioned that. I mean, what's coming, or what? I guess the first question is, do you have any of that kind of implemented into the land side of the platform? And if not, is it in the works, or there's some things that we can expect or be looking forward to?
Yeah, a lot of people saw it at Nape, so I'm not spoiling anything, I don't think. But we're trying to release it this quarter. But first version of this, you can imagine, would be a lease summarizer. So we've got 6 million leases in our system. We've taken a lot of that filing information, so grantee, grantor, term, royalty, section, township range, a lot of the basic information, and that's what we pull so that you can go search for it, and then you can read the lease document itself, right? What we have now, and the prototype that we showed, which I think will be the first version, will be ready this quarter, is the ability to go in, ask a question, or just click on a button, and it immediately summarizes the lease, but doesn't only give you, in a matter of about, I don't know, average time of 3 seconds for a lease. Not only does it summarize it for you, gives you all that information, but it also gives you parties involved, considerations, provisions, warranties. It pulls all that out as well. And then you could take that information. So we showed it to somebody who had recently made a pretty big acquisition, and they said, man, we think that this could have taken 2 months of diligence down to a few weeks if leveraged something like this, which is awesome, right? But I think here's what I would say, like in that same spirit, is that didn't solve a brand new problem. Like that's what everybody has to understand, that like generative AI right now isn't going out, I'm not saying it never will, isn't going out and solving problems that we couldn't solve. It's just reducing that time to value gap, right? Like it's reducing the amount of time by a massive amount that you can go do this. And I think it's important also, some of the hype that came out originally was like, oh man, this is going to replace a bunch of jobs. And our stance on it was, no, that's not going to be the case. And again, going back to Silas, he had I laughed. He had a pretty good analogy. He was like, listen, we're not trying to invent a carpenter. We're just trying to invent a better nail gun. So it's just going to help you. Like, you're still going to need the carpenter to go do the work, just like you're always going to need landman, but everybody's going to be expected to be more efficient. And I think our stance on this also is like, yeah, okay, well, you're saying that it's 30% more efficient. Does that mean you can take 30% of the cost out of your business? And we would say, no, don't expect to do that. As a matter of fact, you may even spend a little bit more. But I think the key is, and what everybody has to understand is, going back to the expectation set from billions of people starting to leverage the technology, the expectation is that everybody's going to have to be more efficient. So it's not like, no, you can just cut 30% of your business. Like a year or 2 years from now, everybody's just going to be expected to be doing this stuff. And I think that's where I try to push CEOs and other folks that I talk to in our industry. And I'm like, listen, you got to lean into this, because if you don't, you could fall behind where we think the curve is going to go here. And that's certainly where we are, Brent, and kind of how we think about it and how we think about land. And clearly, we think this will also apply. Speaking of the land side, there's a lot of other documents out there that we have, even thinking New Mexico and Oklahoma reg apps and orders, and a lot of the information that's just embedded in a lot of those documents that we should start pulling and making it easier for our users to do their job.
Yeah. You nailed it. You're going to have to be 30% better, and if you want to stay relevant, involved, and active, you're going to have to embrace it. And you have to start small. To your point, you have to think about, okay, how can I use this? You have to make it a part of your toolkit. And just like anything, the more you use a tool, the better you're going to get with it, and the more capable you'll be with that resource. And so I think that's what we push. And we're talking to people, everybody's like, oh God, it's going to eliminate landman. It's not. Someone still has to review and interpret and apply it within context. It will make you more efficient. Yes. It's going to work because there's, fewer landmen coming into this business today than there were 15, 20 years ago. And it's because of all these advances, we're starting to see that trend, and we're going to continue to see that. But those of us in the business have to become better with the tools, have to become better with the resources, and leverage them to make their job easier and make them better, make them more valuable, frankly.
Right? Yeah. I agree. And, I would say, even if you don't have, clearly we're a little bit different than probably a lot of people listening to this, meaning we have a pretty massive, tech organization, and we have a lot of resources purely devoted to building product. But I would say, even if you're relatively new to Gen AI and you've heard about ChatGPT, but you kind of leaned away from it, it's like, okay, well, whatever. I asked a question and it gave me a wrong answer, so I'm not going to ask again. Yeah. I would encourage you to continue to use something, because what it does is it helps you become familiarized with what everybody's calling prompt engineering now, helping to understand that, yeah, you may not get exactly what you want right at the very beginning, but that's the beauty of these models, is that you can hone in on what you want, and they will listen. The term is hallucinations. So they will hallucinate. These models are built to generate an answer, and they will give you an answer. But I think it goes back to, this is where, what we were well positioned in, that it comes back to the data. And what I was at a conference where I spoke just 2 weeks ago, and it was a lot of CEOs, and I said, the three things y'all need to understand is data is the new currency. So these generative AI is virtually useless without data. So data is your currency, but it's not just the data itself, it's the way the data is structured. So you have to start thinking about, like, if you throw it a bunch of unstructured data and that's not well defined, you won't get much value out of it. So you have to think through that piece. And then the second piece, you already touched on it. I recommend educate and invest for your employees and making sure they understand what this means, and as you're building that culture of innovation. And then the last one would be focus on security. Be careful how you use those things. And that's what actually the last 6 to 9 months we've been working with a lot of our clients on, is, hey, how can we partner with you at Enverus to help us build things behind our firewall where we can leverage our proprietary data as well as your proprietary data, and throw these models on top of it and get the answers. I think that's what we spend a lot of time doing.
Yeah. Colin, you had given a great analogy that helps us understand kind of where we are in the AI age of a video game, and kind of like the state, like this is Atari. Like, can you explain that for our listeners that think that, this isn't going anywhere, or we're so far ahead, or whatever it is?
Yeah. I'm actually glad you asked the question, because the other thing I would say for anybody listening to this is, everybody's on a different part of their journey in this movement. And that is completely okay. I think everybody needs to realize and not panic if they feel like they're behind, because our opinion is we are at the very beginning of this thing. And certainly other people may be further down the line and leveraging it. But my analogy, Khalil, to your point, is I've got an 11-year-old boy that's really into video games, and he plays, NCAA 2025 and Madden 2025. And I was thinking about it the other day, and I was like, man, if this Gen AI and AI journey were to be a video game, the end state is Madden 25, and like where we are today, the equivalent of Atari Pong. Like, date myself a little bit, but remember when Pong came out, and it's like, that's where we are. And it's just, we're going to see the level of innovation that's going to take place. I mean, look at what it's every week you're reading something new, and we're at the very beginning of this stuff.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting, and that's why you got to partner with the right folks, and because, your business, and Brent, you shouldn't be responsible for staying in front of every single thing that moves, but you should partner with the right people that can help you, be informed and take advantage of some of those things. Like I've got a 13-year-old daughter who's, she's going into high school, and we're starting to think about college, and I'm like, my wife was talking about
what you look like from you.
Exactly. She was like, what should we encourage her to study? And I'm like, hey, just tap the brakes for a second and ask me in 2 years, because I don't know. They may have majors around prompt engineering by that time. I don't know.
It's certainly real. It's like, I've got a 16-year-old son, and we're real close, and it's like, hell, at this point, do I just, send him to a 3-year technical school to learn how to do prompt engineering, and then send him off for a trade? So, you know what I mean? Like, everything changing.
I think there's a lot of validity to that, man. A lot of I have other conversations with some friends that are talking about trade schools, and I think what it is going to do, I read an article today just about, it was China encouraging all their primary and secondary students to use DeepSeek. And I'm sitting here going, man, like all the cognitive functioning for people, that's certainly going to change at some point, if you can just go in and get an answer whenever you want it. So I think it's the writing's on the wall that things will evolve and change. How it's going to impact everybody, I think, is a big question mark, right? Like at the end of the day. But it's, again, turning your back on it it will be really bad. It'll be a mistake because, like I said, this thing's going to evolve, and it's probably going to evolve pretty quickly. But you don't have to. I just want to make sure that, like, people don't think you have to boil the ocean. Just start really small with individual use cases. Educate your employee base on just leveraging it for note taking or sending off emails or anything that you feel like is small is just fine. And then what I would encourage is, again, think of what these things are good at, which is aggregating large amounts of data, and think of, in your base or your business, what are some of those problem statements that we have a data constraint on, meaning like just being able to digest and leverage and get value out of this data, and then distill it down even from there and start really small. Like when we did this, it talked about the 6 million core DOS documents. We didn't start with 6 million. We started with like 100, and then said, okay, let's start building a use case around these, right? So you got to start.
And as well, within whatever business you're doing, especially in land, data, quality data is important. Your answers are only going to be as good as the quality of your data and how systematic you are about capturing and doing that. So I think that's going to be a big part of the land business. I think gone are going to be the days where you just turn in a little basic report, with no documents associated with it. I mean, you're going to need to be expected to keep good data so that you can take your project data or your land data for the thing that you're doing and be able to plug it into a product like Enverus, so that you can couple good data, about the activities that you're working within for your client or, for your company, your E&P company, and then leverage it with the public data that you provide, and then be able to ask those questions, that combines your own data with the public data, and then you're that much more efficient. You're going to make decisions 30% faster, and opportunity loss is a big deal. So if you can get ahead of that,
I think that's right.
Pushing that all the way down, you're going to be all the better.
Yeah, I think that's right. And to tie it kind of come full circle, Khalil, on what you asked earlier, and about some of the most, we talked about Prism being underutilized in the sense of there's so much that it can do. We understand that it's a broad platform. So just kind of teasing up something else that we've been working on for the last year that we'll get the first version out this quarter is leveraging everything we learned with Instant Analysts and then applying Instant Analysts to Prism. And we think that generative AI is fundamentally going to change people engage with software forever, period. And so we talked about the onboarding, how no one likes to go to trainings. We said, well, what if people don't have to do that? So here's an example. We start building out on the back end, building out the fundamental structure and architecture that allows you to go into Prism, actually ask the question, hey, show me the most emerging trends based on production and permitting and the Permian just in the last 90 days. And it actually knows the queries to run. It knows the data sets to look for, and then it actually builds out the widget for you without you ever having to know how to use Prism. And so we're starting small. I think, we'll start with a subset of data, wells, rigs, permits, I think power plants, parcels, and then we'll start there, and then we'll continue to build off of that, so that if you need a quick question or an answer to a question, or you're just trying to get into something quickly, you shouldn't have to be an expert. You shouldn't have to have a pilot license to go in and figure out how to get what you need. And so we understand, because we listen to our clients, we understand that that's a challenge, and we're leveraging this new technology to go and get in front of it and solve it. So I think that kind of ties back to other ways you can leverage this stuff to drive change and evolve. And that's what we're focused on doing.
Yeah, it's great. This has been fun. Thank you for joining us, Colin. We could talk for a lot longer, but
no doubt,
we all got things to do. We got to actually work.
This is the most fun part of my day today. I can promise you that.
I'm kind of fretting over what's going to be after this.
But I appreciate the invite. Happy to do this anytime. Love what y'all are doing. Congrats on the podcast success, and Brent, it's always It's always a pleasure, man. Need to go grab lunch or grab dinner sometime soon.
We do, man. It's been too long. Thank you for your time.
Enjoyed today's topic? Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Learn more at dudley-land.com. See you next episode.